Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, here in Santa Clara, California. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're following this out there on the World Wide Web via SYS-CON TV, day 2 we've reached of Cloud Expo Silicon Valley, and Adaptivity we've reached for the day 2 keynote. That's going to mean, I know, animations that the like of which you have never seen before. Let's give it up for Tony Bishop, CEO of Adaptivity, who is going to talk about how cloud's transforming the business of enterprise IT. Tony, enjoy.
Great. Good. Are we on there? Can everybody hear me okay in the back? There we go. Yep. So first of all, I want to thank Boyd and Intel for that nice plug. I'm actually not going to talk about us this morning, but I definitely want you to come back at 1:30 this afternoon to hear us talk about us. So definitely know this is the hardcore technology group that makes it out for an 8:15 keynote. So with that,
now,
what I want to do is
you want to systems that are truly aligned to meet business demand is an understanding these little guys. Workloads come in all shapes and sizes. Let's say you're a day trader accessing real-time market information. The workloads you're creating need to be incredibly fast, dependable during market hours, and should be able to propagate like rabbits. But payroll workloads only have to get up twice a month. They have to crunch a lot of data and be really secure. Every workload has different requirements. They hit different thresholds and scale differently. At the end of the day, whether a workload can do its job properly and consistently will make or break your IT system. Now, in reality, all that IT generally asks about a workload is it mission critical? How much storage and CPU does it need? Then throw up a couple virtual machines and call it good. But it's likely your workload has to take unnecessary risks, travel to out-of-the-way places to interact with data, and collaborate with other workloads in unsafe environments. Building IT without understanding workloads is like building an amusement park with just one type of ride. Bad idea. Instead, we profile IT workloads from every perspective: availability, dependencies, collaboration requirements, security, and integrity. Where will it go physically? How will I monitor it? Where do I source it? How does a new demand affect this workload? We call this fit for purpose, designing and building around workloads. Because happy workloads means happy IT. Seriously, don't peeve off your workloads. Instead, use Adaptivity's Blueprint for IT Lifecycle Suite to design and build IT that treats workloads like the heroes that they are.
So sort of with that, what we thought we would do is sort of open it up that what I want to cover off with you today is a short presentation around what is real today in terms of cloud computing. Because there's a lot of market noise, right? There's a lot of different definitions of what cloud is. And then there's also a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's being created around it. And what I've done is tried to remove it from a vendor perspective and laid out a presentation for you all that covers off industry research, survey and validation of C-level folks purchasing across Global 2000 corporations and making decisions to move, if they have not already moved, to a cloud computing model. And then the second thing that I want to cover off for you today was I laid out 5. And these are not the only 5. For the people that don't believe, the people that are naysayers when it comes to cloud computing for the enterprise, these are only 5 reference examples that are publicly documented, layout where they've gone beyond the basic definition of what a lot of people are defining as the cloud today. And the third thing is that they're doing it in large, secure operating models within enterprises. So I wanted to give you that as a start to the second day here and to start to open your minds up to what can be done and the fact that it is real and that what you need to do being here, obviously very hardcore technicians and technologists making the investment to get up at 8:15 in the morning to come listen to this session, that, you know, when you're looking and talking to all the various folks today and out at the Cloud Expo hall, that there's a lot of capability today. There's a lot of success today that you can build on it within your organization. And then second, if you want to sort of tie that together, look at the Intel presentation that was just done. and look at the fact that Intel is publishing documented, validated, hardcore, engineered knowledge around how to take today and move and build and deploy applications and platforms combined together that can move you to the cloud. So building off of this morning already, building off of these examples, I wanted to give to you folks today, this morning here, the ability to say there is validation points that if we're not doing it in our organization, we need to be doing it in our organization. So let's take a look at some of these stats. This is from the 451 group. How many people in here know the 451 group? Hands up. Okay. If you don't, you should go to it. THE451.com. They've been around for a good 10, 12 years. What's interesting about this group is when I was running technology for the investment bank of Wachovia, we found that they were very good at catching trends at the early stages of trends, number one. Number two, they were also very good at laying out fingers on the pulse, as I used to call it, and explain to my team who is doing what with technology. So they were very good at which vendors and which users are coming together to do what and towards these new trends. and they've laid out a very interesting report called IT is the Cloud, which I thought was a pretty good analogy when you think about it, that IT being the cloud, when really the cloud is the evolution of what the internet did to e-commerce, right? The internet is now doing to collaboration and computing, right, to the enterprise. So if you sort of think of that evolution, right, so e-commerce to computing and collaboration is sort of the evolution, everything that is IT should be about the cloud, and if it isn't, then we got to fix it. So what was interesting is in this survey across Global 2000 corporations, CIOs, CTOs, head of infrastructure, head of architecture, head of engineering type folks, they were able to go through and hit a series of questions. And I'm only going to give you 2 slides, but I thought these slides were, and I called it only summary of the points. One was, look at the first bullet. Number of enterprises not using some form of cloud computing will shrink from 25% this year to 10% or less next year. So I would pose to you that if you're dealing with executives and trying to get business funding for it, that's probably a good point that says, are we behind the curve even? That's what I would take as the first point. Second point, more than 1/3 of end users surveyed will increase cloud spending by more than 20% next year. So one of the things that was interesting as we were just even setting up is the trend of funding and net new funding. Not funding to keep lights on, not funding to do maintenance, right? Not funding to do upgrades or nominal growth refreshes to your infrastructure lifecycle, is being focused now predominantly around how do I change my delivery paradigm and my fulfillment paradigm of IT in the enterprise. And I'm putting budgets, actually line item budgets called cloud computing into it. So as a CIO and CTO, if you're not working with them, it's one of the things that I would challenge you to do is that most are actually calling out line item budgets, which means this trend has matured from a concept and an emerging technology approach to being something that is going to be adopted on a mass basis, if it hasn't already. Third point that comes out of their report, trust and control remain the key inhibitors to cloud adoption. Who in here does not agree with that? The trust and control, all right, are the keys to cloud. Who in here agrees with that? Can I see hands? A few people are awake? Okay, that's great. The final point that I thought was interesting, and you've got a number of vendors here, from Microsoft to Oracle to Abaquo to CA and others, that are helping you provide what this bottom point is today, a platform as a service. Okay? That is the ability to take and put together application containers, infrastructure containers, virtual environments, and be able to package and assemble those physically and logically together. All right? A platform as a service environment. If you are not looking at that today in your organization, you need to, because this is the fundamental intersection point of where the demand from the users hitting applications occurring actually intersect with how the infrastructure is coming together and being acquired and fulfilling that actual execution request. So platform as a service is the area that if you do not have it in your enterprise strategy today, you need to implement that in your enterprise strategy today, and you need to start addressing it now. And the survey even shows it that 42% survey expect to use some form in 2011, up from 25%. So almost half of the group, Global 2000 corporations, are moving towards a PaaS environment today. How many people in here, just a quick survey, are actually trying to implement some form of a platform as a service inside their organization? All right, or at least using external fulfillment. See a good percentage even in here, probably about 30%, and that's probably just because some people are waking up, but that's okay. It's definitely the place to go. So this one's a little hard to read, but it's a table that comes out of that report. I'm going to call out a couple for you. Basically, and it's why I started out the video around workloads. If you don't start thinking about top-down from the business generates workloads. The workloads fulfill different parts of a business process. That business process, right, and those workloads invoke services. Those services then consume infrastructure resources. It's not hard stuff, right? But it is thinking it in a paradigm that's not, I'm going to build from a system up. I'm going to actually build from a design of a workload down. And in this case, what was interesting that I thought is 52% of those surveyed right now are using pilot projects to experiment and build test clouds. So actually where I do my dev test environments. How many people in here are doing dev test clouds today? Right? A good percentage. This is actually one of the areas that you want to look at. But what I thought was interesting was if you go down in the next 12 months, web-based applications, 63.2% of these organizations surveyed are going to actually use some form of a cloud delivery paradigm, predominantly based on a platform as a service with a supporting infrastructure as a service model to be able to actually take and deliver the ability to change the way they deliver service to their end users and obviously reap the rewards and benefits. A couple others that I thought is, look at where it says production. 23.9% have applications today in 2010 that are running in some form of a cloud paradigm within an enterprise. But what I thought was really interesting as a stat for you is that 42.7, so almost 43%, expect to move production-based apps. That's a maturity model starting to occur. That means if you're not there, you better start looking at it. But also, if you are there, it gives you the confidence that your peers and others are doing the same thing. And I think when you leverage things like the Open Data Center Alliance, you leverage other types of organizations that are out there trying to say the how-tos and the best practices are going to be the types of environments that you're going to want to look at and leverage. And I think the final one that I want to call out for you is the analytics and reporting. This is one of the ones that Wall Street figured out a while ago that has huge, huge impact to any business. The ability to make decisions and make decisions quickly, accurately, and with a level of confidence that allows you to be able to take and change the way you conduct business is very critical. And what I would pose to you is it is a high-value target that if you're not looking at in your organization today, you need to be looking at it as you move forward. And a significant percentage is starting to grow. And I think it just becomes, there is not an industry where you're not looking at the behavior and the consumption of users and what they're doing from a client standpoint, from an internal standpoint, or analytics on how are your financial actions trending within your organization. So you've got a couple of areas that are very mission critical, business impacted oriented that you should be looking at and moving to the cloud. So I'm going to cover 5. These are not the only 5 in the world. I want to stress that again because I've seen some of the stuff written even out of yesterday's being tweeted and across different ones where people are going, oh, it's either it's a panacea or it doesn't work. It seems to be the kind of take. So please don't misquote me. Say whatever you want about me, but don't misquote me. I'm saying that I've covered out 5 for you that are publicly documented that I thought were interesting types of examples that are in production today that I think is a way that you folks should be looking at the cloud and the cloud paradigm within your enterprise. A productivity cloud. That is the ability to have people collaborate and be productive, all right, in doing their daily task. Second, a data cloud. How many people in here are doing a data cloud or even think that they're doing a data cloud? Okay, a couple of hands. This is one that if you're not doing it, I would tell you need to get figuring out how you're going to do it, and you're going to have a great reference example here. Third one, high-performance computing. The ability to do massive analysis and modeling within the cloud. I think I already hit that, but I'm going to call out a couple examples for you. Fourth, a platform as a service. How funny, I just told you guys you need to be doing platform as a service. All right, and fifth and finally, a business process cloud. All right, this is where it's going to evolve to. The more mature, advanced organizations are already starting to orchestrate business processes in a cloud paradigm, dealing with multiple cloud-based services. So I'm going to cover off all 5 of those for you. So the first one, a productivity cloud. If you notice on the bottom left of each one of my slides, you're going to see where there's a source. So this one, I pulled some external public reference material and information around Forrester's Technology Impact Report. If you haven't seen these, you should Google them and look at them. They're phenomenal reports that lay out the business strategy and both the qualitative and quantitative economic impact of different technology strategies being adopted. And in this one, they called up multiple Fortune 500 organizations. I know I was personally involved with one where I used to work, and we were able to take and build a private cloud model. How many people in here have heard of a thing called Microsoft MOS SharePoint Framework? Anybody in here ever heard of that? They had a thing called web parts and web services that could go with it, right? And guess what? Those services, could be instantiated on demand. Those services were at an abstracted virtual endpoint. Those services did not let you know exactly where you were hardwired into any store or any computing environment, right? And those services could be tiered based on the level of access that you're allowed from a user permission, service level, etc. So one of the things that became interesting that I know we dealt with when at Wachovia and other organizations have dealt with, as Forrester lays out, is the ability to be able to create this flexible allocation model where all documents, all artifacts, all collaboration, all communication is being done in this kind of online environment. And this is not an advertisement for Microsoft because Google obviously took the same kind of model, right, which it calls out here, and was able to start to drive the same kind of paradigm. The difference I would state, between Microsoft and Google is Microsoft understands enterprise security. Google probably understands, quick, rapid flexibility to it. And I'd probably score the two that kind of way. So depending on what you're trying to do, in both cases you have that. What I think is important is, I don't know how many of you understand, but in your data centers, the largest percentage of proliferation of growth in infrastructure is in storage for unstructured content and unstructured files. So that means if it's not in a database, all right, it means it's sitting in some sort of storage, and in most cases it's eating up very expensive Tier 1 type SAN or NAS storage, all right, that you're dealing with. Those suckers run really hot, which means you need more cooling units, okay? So the more cooling you need, along with the more storage you need, all right, ends up creating an expensive storage because I've got video and I've got email messages and I got text messages and I got Excel files and I have Word documents and PowerPoint documents and you name it. All of those environments are a massive consumption. The reason I start with this one is this is a low-risk approach to taking and adopting a strategy that you can run in a private cloud or a trusted cloud or external cloud model today that can have radical impact on your data center. It can have radical impact on the labor required to support that environment, which, oh, by the way, is a true hidden cost in most enterprise IT operations today. All right? And it is also a strategy where you can start to build an operational paradigm that you can say, well, why am I not doing this for every type of service? It has a web front end. It has, has services sitting in some sort of middleware environment, and it has some sort of store environment on the back end that consumes infrastructure in a very specific way. That could be ad hoc, could be predictable, it could be, dynamic. So this is probably the first one that I would pose to, that if you're not looking at, here is a great strategy today that you could be implementing, that people aren't going to go, oh, don't break my infrastructure, don't take away mine, kind of thing. So it helps you get over that cultural mindset to move towards this paradigm. So it's the first one I want to hit for you. The second one, this is probably the most strategic cloud strategy that you can implement in your enterprise today, and that is a data cloud. And in doing so with this data cloud, the reason for it is information, if you have gotten what your industry practice is the lifeblood of business today. All right, information about transactions, information about customers, all right? Information about, how I'm doing business, information how I report to the lovely government and the regulations that I need to do to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant or HIPAA compliant or anything of that kind of nature. And that information, by the way, is not just in a relational database format. It's all sitting in flat file format. It's sitting in unstructured content format. But there's strategies out there today that allows you to build an abstracted, on-demand, not hardwired environment that can run inside your firewall or outside or both. Obviously, you've got to configure it and set it all up. That allows you to be able to pull from multiple information sources and allow you to create a single aggregated view of that information without have to hard code to every single store. Most approaches today is why you hear these data warehouse programs and so on is you've got to hardwire into each of these stores from each of the applications, and then you've got to do some sort of translation and normalization and so on. They call that ETL, I think, the last time I checked. So, and those environments don't give you the timeliness and real-time ability to look at information. So part of what's interesting about this, and this one happens to be a little bank that called out in SOA magazine called Wachovia at the time, now part of Wells Fargo, that was able to take across their investment bank, their wholesale bank, and their retail bank and be able to pull together strategy leveraging technologies where they mapped the models of the services of the information that was needed. They understood what repositories had them and where by doing dependency mapping. And then they were able to implement a couple of technologies, that allows you to give you a federated view that could be called as a web service from any application, and it has a meta model definition that you can tailor as a configuration change, not a hard coding change. And it means days to weeks to be able to give you a global view of customers, days to weeks to give you a global view of transactions, days to weeks to give you a global view of any combination of data. And oh, by the way, it's all internet accessible. It is not hardwired. It has the ability to assemble and reassemble. And oh, by the way, it consumes infrastructure in a different dynamic paradigm, a la a cloud-like model. So the technologies that you have here was composite software, was in their information server. You had Oracle Coherence as the data cache that took these composite servers and loaded them into memory, so you had instantaneous access to reading and writing of that information, so that the applications and the users felt like it was instantaneous to an eyeball, right, kind of user view. And then the other thing is you had TIBCO laying out the metadata management, feeding and telling those guys where that data was and managing it in that kind of manner. So when you think about it, data in the cloud becomes the mechanism where the business is going to feel the biggest impact, right, to what the cloud can do for them. So I just told you a low-risk one, right, on SharePoint and productivity and your whole, kind of paradigm. Now I'm telling you about a different strategy of where do you want to drive the biggest impact into an environment today that is production-proven. And to do it production-proven in a financial services world means it can also apply to any other world because it's pretty strict and regulatory-oriented and has very sensitive qualities of experience in service levels. So it's a second one that I want to throw at you guys to sort of open your minds as you're talking to your various vendors and looking at your various strategies today. Third one, high-performance computing in the cloud. Here, it was a Swiss bank. This was in the Open Grid Forum. They had an EGA user forum presentation that called it out. The bank was UBS. And the director talking about it was laying out how he had varying cycles of when he had to run different analysis and reporting that would peak on a month and quarter-end basis, that he did not have the ability to acquire infrastructure for that month-end, quarter-end, year-end scenarios, but required the ability to be able to load and provision data, load and provision analytics, and be able to run that into an external environment on a temporary basis. So this would be more of your infrastructure as a service and platform as a service kind of paradigms. But what was interesting is the ability to handle that variable peak periods by going to an external fulfillment strategy, leveraging a cloud-like paradigm, is something that you can do today that, oh, by the way, has a lot of maturity in the management and the technology controls that are around that today. So it's a third one that I would call out for you that I think you should be looking at. The fourth one, if you look in the Cloud Computing Journal of July 2009, there was a little logistics company called Federal Express. How many people in here heard of Federal Express, right? Good one. So what's interesting at Federal Express is that the amount of, I think they do 11 million packages a day. 11 million packages a day. So you think of the volume of change, you think of the requirements that they need to be able to do, to be able to accommodate that volume, to be able to report on it, to be able to service and fulfill around it, and to be able to actually take and react to needs of changes, different types of periods that are peak from a business calendar event such as Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, so on. The ability to turn around and deal with the fact that, hey, competition's coming at me from the federal government and the post office, to competition's coming at me from UPS and other types of strategies in DHL. They realized that they could not react fast enough to the new types of components, information, services that the business wanted to add to be able to accommodate with this exploding business. I mean, what a great business model, right? I mean, it has nothing but increased in terms of demand since inception. So when you think about that and you're looking at your enterprise and you're saying, where across my enterprise and my value chain is that the demand constantly growing? And you think, so what they've done as a strategy is targeted and said the ability for us to be able to package and assemble new applications, new data services combined with infrastructure within minutes versus weeks. All right, you heard that? Minutes to weeks, was one of the strategies that they went after. And the technologies that they combined with was Apastry's Cloud IQ, dealing with the management layer, right, of applications and data services, and VMware's vSphere, giving me my abstracted environment to be able to dial up and dial down, running on standardized stacks and deployment models that they came up with. So a very, very good approach. But when you think about it, it's a no-brainer that if you can pick a demand model within your enterprise like they had that's constantly growing, and the ability to show that IT can help them react faster, made it sense from a funding standpoint, made it sense from why we've got to get this right, and made it also from the sense that it's a way for us to be able to focus less on building and deploying and more on innovating. So it's an area of another type of enterprise cloud model. Again, it's a private cloud model, but one that you should be looking at and drawing from as an example. And finally, I thought this one was really interesting because I've seen it in a number of places, and here was one of the first public stories about it. There was a press release recently, came out in September of this year, and it was a media group based in the UK, a media group that publishes newspapers, websites, right, content like that. And it was with Cordis, who is actually here today. They've also leveraged Google Apps. They also leverage Salesforce.com. They also leverage Amazon Web Services. So think about that. A lot of the major players that are out there from a SaaS standpoint to an infrastructure as a service standpoint. And what's happening is because they had started to move down the path where they moved every type of fulfillment model in, whether it was infrastructure, right, middleware type platforms, or applications into a cloud-like paradigm, now the next stage of maturity had to occur. And that's why I left this one as the last one, because I just wanted to open your minds related to it, which was, as you lay this out, they needed to be able to orchestrate those services combined together now. So how do I combine the Amazon Web Services with different applications? How do I combine, right, Salesforce and their information along with, what I have in my Google Apps to let me create a mashup on demand? So the ability to orchestrate the process of those services themselves as different business processes invoke them to support the day in the life of the business is going to become the area that you need to start looking at if you're not now, because it's like anything now. Now you need that orchestrator, that's going to be able to sit and tell everybody what do they need to do to come together, because it's virtual, it's dynamic, it's on demand, it's abstracted. And it's at a point where how do I have that end-to-end control mechanism with the way that the business operates and behaves that allows me to be able to bring all this together? So I thought it was a really good story for you folks to open your mind with as you're there today, and that you really should be taking a look at. I'm not saying they're the only ones. There's a lot of different people out there. But here's a publicly documented story of what we know other types of firms are doing that really, really is going to make a big difference. And if you're not looking at orchestration in the cloud and tying that to how business process executes and how infrastructure services and application services and data services are going to come together to fulfill that, and you're not thinking in a Six Sigma lean kind of way and in a factory kind of model, then you're not going to get to where cloud can take your enterprise. So, and that's just some food for thought for you. Finally, I want to leave you with a couple of points. Enterprise clouds, intersect between at a crossroads of where the business process, what we just ended on, are occurring with how you engineer systems today and where you need to go tomorrow. And if you're not looking on a multidimensional basis of business processes across the enterprise, your enterprise, with how you're building and deploying and running systems, and how you're starting to interject cloud-like models inside or outside your organization into that environment, and the ability to link that to the business process, then you're not going to realize the potential for you being able to change the way your business runs through IT. Second point, which builds on what I just closed on. IT is the new supply chain of the business. And if you're not looking at that and thinking in that manner, and you're not teaching your business users, and your operations folks that really, if IT is not there, what happens to the business? That becomes the first question. The second, if IT can't react to the business the way that you need and how you need it, then what are we going to do? Right? And third, it becomes, this is why we need a cohesive strategy to be able to lay out how I'm going to incrementally add these building blocks to add value today and come towards a strategic factory supply chain kind of vision and state tomorrow. Third, enterprise clouds enable this new business delivery paradigm. I just gave you examples of seconds to minutes. I gave you examples of the ability to radically change the cost model to support productivity, all right, and give it better flexibility, but do it at a lower cost with a better service paradigm. I talked about the fact that you could give the business information today on demand in a global view kind of manner because of this internet-connected way of computing that I didn't have before. Now, it means you've got to buy a couple of technologies and implement them. You've got to do a lot of homework around mapping out the process and the data and the infrastructure life cycles and discipline. But it can be done, and it can allow you to create a new type of paradigm for the business. And finally, for those that have heard me present before and stated, enterprise clouds are real. They're in production. It is being done today. And if you don't have the confidence or if you don't have the vision to understand that, you need to step back and look inwards, remove yourself from it, and help those in your organization see it because others are doing it, and it's going to radically transform business the way it is today. So with that, we're actually 11 minutes early. So I wanted to finish and say thank you, and if anybody had any questions.
Let me just bring you the microphone. You see they're clapping. That's a good sign. Here you are, sir.
Business process as a cloud. Did you look at the IBM Lombardi blueprint?
Yep.
Actually, that is one of the best things which maybe need to put in our PowerPoint because we use that Lombardi a lot.
Yep.
Our business orchestrations.
Yep.
We are pushing into we create and we use our teamwork as a BPM tool.
Yep.
And push into the private clouds. So
well, I think
that's all real in our world.
It is. And for those that don't know about Lombardi software that IBM bought this year at a nice multiple, and the reason I'm into multiples and value multipliers is, if you haven't known it, my company just went through a nice VC round and my VCs are in the crowd. So we do think multiples, so our VCs hear it. Is Lombardi is a pretty impressive software on two fronts. One, what they've done is that basically you can have your global users of your business participate via a web browser and be able to map your business functions together and the associated business activities. Probably where I would suggest that Lombardi has a gap is being able to link that down into the specific infrastructure engineering components that are necessary to best fulfill those activities. But it's a very powerful technology in that manner. The second thing is it's a great feed into the business orchestration that if you are an IBM shop, then you need to be beating the crap out of IBM to help you understand how to go use Lombardi and then feed it into your BPM actual orchestration capabilities that they provide in their suite. So great point.
Another question over here.
Yeah. Can you go one slide, the previous slide? When you said IT has become the new supply chain of business.
Yep.
That's a great concept. What do you think are the challenges for an enterprise to train their IT folks to bring that agility in their thought process to actually enable that?
So make sure I understand it. You're saying, what do you need to do to teach your IT folks how to be able to start to think in that kind of paradigm?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's funny. When I had, 400 people working for me when I was at Wachovia, one of the biggest things that we found was we actually had to do a couple things. One was we had to teach our own people how to think the way the business thinks and looks at things. The second thing we had to do is we had to then teach the business how we as IT folks look and think with things. So the way we did that, which was kind of interesting, so on a bottom up of how the IT folks think and present, we actually did a trade show inside the company. And we literally had our folks there presenting, and we created standard templates that said, so what is this that I'm here talking about? How does it relate to you? Right? What functions does it allow me to fulfill? How does it tie together with other components, right, and systems that support you in the day in the life of your business? So this is the first point that I would stress to you is, what is the day in the life of the business or the many days in the life of the business? And then how do those day in the lives react based on the way the IT systems operate and behave? Then what we had to do is we had to start teaching folks about business process analysis. We had to teach them about system process analysis. And then we had to teach them about engineering analysis. And we had to show them how architecture and engineering and configuration and operations all have to come linked together. And that if you don't have those linked together, then you don't have your foundational building block to be able to then go fulfill whatever that process calls out. So I would say, in sum, two things. It's process, teaching about process. Obviously, ITIL does a lot for it, but there's a lot that's theoretical where you got to teach about applied process. And then the second thing I would do is I would probably start to have where you start to showcase and teach the IT folks to present to the business, pull them out of their comfort zone, and make them actually have to do it, but give them the structure of how to do it. And I think that's what we found brings them together. Okay?
Okay.
A final question over here. Coming up.
Tony, when you talked about the 5 instantiations of cloud, you actually cited some specific products and vendors. They were all fairly established platforms. Other than Adaptivity, of course, who would you say are the 1 or 2 market makers or real disruptive technologies we should be keeping our eyes on?
That's a good question. I would say I would probably go back to, I started out quoting for you folks the 451 group, and the reason I did that is they are very, very good at telling you who is doing what from an emerging technology standpoint and actually which organizations are adopting them in an emerging technology kind of maturity way. So the first part I'd answer back is that if you're not looking at the 451, I have found them to be a very non-biased, excellent resource for answering that kind of question. The second thing that I would do is I would state you need to lay out where, from a capability standpoint, are you as an organization in terms of maturity from how you meter, monitor, provision, how you plan, design, implement, how you track, right, orchestrate, optimize, govern across your life cycle. And I think you need to go through all 3 of those views of the life cycle. And based on that, I would do a combination of which vendors are my core from the mature established side, and then I would look at their ecosystem partners would be the way that I would approach it, stating there. Like, for example, if you go and you're a CA and you go down the path, you would have seen, hey, I was working with 3Terra. They had a pretty good vision of certain things, of how to package and deploy app containers and sort of manage those. They also then were working with a firm called Nimsoft, right? They were also working with a firm called Hyperformix. And in all those cases, you had monitoring, you had the utility metering, and they were plugging into existing CA tool sets around service provisioning and service automation in CMDB type environments, that made sense. I would go the other way and say, Abaco that's coming up next, well-funded, well mature in terms of now multiple years of building a product and having it run into environments, could be the kind of thing. And it depends on really your gap, folks, because if you're not looking at the way you package, deploy, provision, dynamically orchestrate in the runtime, and then also how you meter, monitor, and govern, then you're not going to get your supply chain model right from what we were just talking about. So to those vendors, there is a slew of them, and I don't profess to know them all. But what I can tell you is that I would base it, if I was sitting in your shoes in your organization, I would sit and look at who are my mature product catalog standards from mature vendors and drive off of their ecosystems. Okay?
Great answer and great questions. Let's keep those questions coming all day. Let us say thank you to Tony Bishop. He's on again, I think, a little later today. Yes, Tony? Thought leadership at its best. Another thought leader coming up next. Abaco, thank you again. Tony Bishop.